welcome everyone, and others will join in due course. But this is essentially the final workshop through WeCount, and it's both exciting and sad because we've really enjoyed working on this project and with you all. So what we thought we'd do in this session is to bring some data together so we can see some data from a citywide perspective, look at how participants felt and experienced WeCount, and then at the end some really interesting advocacy perspectives as well. So firstly, thank you, welcome. This will be presented by the WeCount team who are here tonight, and as the head honcho of the UE contingent will be joining us halfway through the session. But here we have Margarida Sardo, Sophie Lagan, and myself. And we also have some data analysis experts in Lewis Brown as well, who's produced some really, really valuable data that I'll be presenting on the next couple of slides. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. I should also say we've got Laura Fogg-Rogers here as well from the team. Hi, Laura.
Yeah, and it will all become clear who we are later because you'll have a chance to chat with us. But yeah, so this is just a moment or two to figure out how people are feeling tonight. So if you're up for doodling, that's why we have pens and paper. So I'm just asking you for the next 30 seconds to a minute to just doodle down how you're feeling, whatever abstract way you'd like. And then you can flip it round and turn it to the screen. So you can see this is my Picasso-esque example. So this is me asleep on a bike. I wouldn't recommend this, obviously. But yeah, I'm feeling a bit tired today. I think it's probably the weather. But yeah, if you want to do the same, and whenever you're ready, you can just flip them around. All right, so we've got Margarida on a chair. Yeah.
Collapsed on a chair.
Collapsed on a chair, nice. Okay. We've got just, oh, wait. I think that's a smiley face with feet or hands, Ben, I'm not sure. Laura,
there's a feet.
Okay. Oh no, so sorry, this is Jeremy. Looks like you're jumping for joy. Are you in a joyful mood?
Oh no, I've got my leg up because I got a bad knee.
Oh no. Okay, good, you're resting it. We've got somebody, Paul, is it beginning with P? Paul, yeah. You're juggling something. What are you juggling?
Lots of things.
Lots of things, yeah. I feel that.
Busy in a word.
Yeah, I feel that. Okay, nice. Cool. So that got us just with our thinking caps on. And we're actually going to switch back to Ben, and then I will come chat to you all later. All right, over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, so if you pop onto the next slide, please. So what we've got, again, as I mentioned, throughout the evening, the next couple of hours is 3 different bits. So you've got myself, I'll be doing some WeCount citywide data. Margarida will be doing the how was it for you perspective, and Sophie will be doing the advocacy perspective. And over the last several workshops, you've heard a lot from me, so I promise I'll keep my bit short. We've got some really, really interesting bits. And the first bit that I just want to share with you is the data. So if you wouldn't mind going on to the next slide, please. So firstly, a massive thanks to Lewis Brown, who's joined us tonight, for doing an unbelievable amount of data crunching across the city. It's really complex data sets, sensors coming in and going out. But Lewis has done an absolutely great job, so I'm very, very grateful for his work here. In the broad scheme of things, we have to think about the caveats of the data. So we need to remember these are low-cost sensors. There are things that can challenge it, things that we need to be aware of. So for example, if we think about the sensor in itself, it works in the daylight. As we go through the year, the amount of daylight changes, etc. We need to bear that in mind in the data. We've tried to account for that in a lot of what we're sharing. And Lewis, please feel free as the master of the data to chip in if you feel you'd like to as well. So firstly, there's a nice diagram here looking at the impact of restrictions on traffic movement across Cardiff. So there's monthly mean average hourly traffic counts, and these are combined against all segments in Cardiff. So if we look at the 9th of November 2020, there was a fire break ending. 19th of December, there was the Tier 4 restrictions and the national lockdown, and then the 7th of August of this year, most restrictions ended essentially. So you can see from that 9th of November fire break, there was an increase, for example, in cars. Tier 4 restrictions came in and national lockdown, there was that decrease. Various levels of restrictions throughout the year, but the 7th of August, they all ended. So there's a pattern in the data there, but we can look at that in a little bit more detail as a before and after. So if you would mind go to the next slide, please. So what we've got here is, I'm not sure if anyone can see the bottom graph. I've got a bar across the bottom graph. It doesn't quite show for me. But so there's some key dates that we've just mentioned here. So around the 9th of November 2020, 19th of December 2020, and the 7th of August. So 9th of November, the fire break ending. 19th of December, the Who of Wales enters the Tier 4 restrictions. So 7th of August is where most remaining pandemic-related restrictions are concluded. So what Lewis has done really nicely here is to look at the impact of the intervention, so pre and post interventions. So if you look at that bottom graph there, you'll be able to see that particular relationship. So pre 9th of November, the 1st of the 11th to the 9th of the 11th, compared to the post, so 10th of the 11th onwards there. Similarly with the 19th of December, there's the 10th of the 11th to the 18th of the 12th, and the 19th of the 12th to the 6th of the 8th of this year. And again, similarly with the 7th of August, the before and after there. And you can see there are clear differences in that before and after. So that's a really nice way of being able to see the impact of various interventions. If you would mind going next slide, please. So if we look specifically at December through to January, and these are mean average hourly counts of the data, there's interesting patterns in the data here, and these are for 10 sensors that we're running all the way through this time period. So there's no new sensors coming in. These are sensors that are running essentially concurrently throughout this period. And there seems to be, throughout the 1st of December to January, a downward trend in those vehicle movements in terms of cars, which is really interesting. There's not much of a change in any other modes, but there's a real nice linear trend there. So what we've got here is a graph that shows the relationship between traffic movements on weekends and weekdays as well. So the key thing to focus on here is the weekend and weekday variation. So as you'd expect, on the weekend, there seems to be a lower amount of cars. On weekdays, there are more amount of cars. So we have to be careful with the trend here in general going from November to September as it increases. This could be the signal of more sensors coming online, so we just need to be really careful with that interpretation. But the relationship here is that weekday relationship, more cars in weekday than on the weekends, and that's throughout the year. Now, something again which is really interesting is speeding by street. So speeding is something that we're all interested in, we've all thought about, we all experience in different ways. So what Lewis has done here is geocoded his street by the speed limits identified using publicly available GPS data. Looked at the data through the WeCount sensors. There's challenges in streets that contain maybe a couple of different speed limits. It's harder to analyze, so they've been excluded from this analysis. But if we have a look at some of the data from some of the streets that we have here, the street with the most speeding, so the percentage of speeding vehicles, Taff's Mead Embankment is at the top, over 12% there. And if Clare Road is up there, Lansdowne Road, etc. And if you get down the bottom, we have Llwynderw and Derry. Those are the streets there. There are a few below them. I can't quite see them because of the black sign, but that is essentially the trend of where those speeding vehicles are. So again, this is another really interesting perspective. This is by the area of Cardiff and the percentage of speeding vehicles within those areas. So in terms of Lewis's analysis, what he's been able to do is to categorise these different areas of Cardiff and see where more speeding is happening. And Heath is where 12% of the vehicles recorded there were speeding. Riverside is up there with 8%, and then down the other end, Rubina, Llandaff, etc. have got the least amount of speeding vehicles. That's not to say there's none, but they are there. Yeah, Allensbank is up quite high on that list on the previous slide. So if you look at speeding by time of day, this again is something I think is quite interesting, is when do people speed? So in terms of the analysis, what we see here is that more speeding, or the highest amount of speeding, happens really early in the morning. It's fairly consistent then throughout the rest of the day and then drops off in the night. So something I find really interesting is that in the night, I often see people speeding. But in terms of the volume of those who are speeding, it might be quite low, but they're quite visible because the roads are quite empty. But early in the morning, between 6 and 7 and 8 is when a lot of the speeding happens across Cardiff, according to the data here. And interestingly, again, by month, when does the speeding happen in Cardiff by month? Well, in May, it seems to be at its highest. It's well, consistently high through summer months, and it drops off in the winter months and starts to pick up through the spring again. So there's patterns in the data that inform us as to when people may be speeding more. The reasons behind these patterns, we'll need to investigate more, but there are patterns there. So this again is really interesting. It's speeding by time of day. So there's a mean daily citywide speed limit. So that in this diagram, we can essentially look at when people are speeding and the proportion of people who are speeding and when. Okay, so at the bottom, you've got the days. On the side, you've got the time of days. So for example, with that mean daily citywide speed limit compliance, 10.6% on Sundays are speeding across the city, which is interesting. And again, if you compare it to that slide before as terms of time intervals, you can see how that really aligns. So you've got the 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning where there's lots of speeding, or lots more speeding than other times. And then later on in the day, there's less of that speeding. So this is speeding on Allensbank Rd. So again, time of day and day itself. You can see again on those weekends, there seemed to be a particularly large amount of speeding on Allensbank Rd really early in the morning. It drops off slightly through the middle of the day, and a little bit further there towards 5 o'clock. It picks up again at 6 o'clock in particular here. But again, it's those early morning hours where there seems to be quite a lot of speeding, both on Allensbank Rd and reflected right across Cardiff as well. So that was a brief overall assessment of the data coming out of Cardiff. And again, Lewis is the data expert, and again, incredibly grateful for the work he's done in pulling those together. There's still a lot of work for us to do to understand, review, improve the data and unpicking it. So what does it mean? Are there any things we can draw out of it? This is a really nice and really impressive examination of the data by Lewis. And again, Lewis, really, really grateful for the work you've put in there. What we also want to do for you all is to give you individual summary reports. So we want to be able to give you a report of your data as a summary of your experience through WeCount. And again, grateful to Lewis for pulling these together and putting in quite a shift to get such a bank of data together into nice reports. So what we'll do is for everyone who's participated, we will provide you with the report, which will tell you about the traffic patterns throughout your sensing history. It'll tell you about vehicle movement, so traffic, cars, pedestrians, cyclists, so you can see that pattern throughout the year. You'll also be able to see information on your speeding data as well, and everyone will be getting their own individual reports at the end of this project, not just as a thank you for participating, but as an acknowledgement that these are your data, this is your ownership. And again, we're incredibly grateful for you taking part in this. Without your participation, WeCount can't happen. It couldn't happen. We couldn't look at citywide data. We couldn't look at individual street data. So again, we're incredibly grateful, and we hope that this little report goes some way to saying thanks for that.